Hello, this is Juliana. In FIRPTA Part 1, I talked about the Foreign Investment in Real Property Act and how it affects the foreigners who are selling their U.S. held real estate. I went over who is considered a foreigner and what the withholding would be. As an escrow agent who handles a lot of transactions that have FIRPTA involved, I get lots of questions from the general public as well as my escrow peers. In this presentation, I would like to answer some of the common questions that come into me. If you have questions of your own, please feel free to put your question or your comment here, and I will answer it as soon as I get it. But first of all, let me go through the disclaimer. The information contained in this video is only intended to provide a guide in the various transactions to which the information is applicable. No representation is made as to the legal validity of the information or the adequacy of it in any specific transaction. The information contained should only be used after consultation with your legal and financial counsel. So question number 1. What if there are more than one sellers and not all of them are foreigners? Withholding has to be done on all those who are foreigners. So the first thing that you will need to do is to determine how much interest each foreign seller has. And then you will need to withhold on his percentage. So for instance, let's say as an example, there are 3 sellers, each owns 1/3. The sales price is $500,000. So the total withholding is 10%, which is $50,000. Each foreign seller has to withhold $16,666.67 from his net proceeds. Question number 2. What if a husband and wife own the property and the husband is a foreigner and the wife is a U.S. citizen? The answer is as follows. If the husband and wife both have ownership of the property and the husband is a foreigner, you have to withhold on the husband's share. And normally it would be counted as if he has 50%. It's not that you would just withhold on the husband and not the wife, or not at all because the wife is a U.S. citizen. No, they each have an ownership, so they each get to have 50%, and the one who is not a U.S. citizen is going to have to do the withholding. Question number 3. What if the husband and wife are both foreigners and they do not have the individual tax identification number? Well, if that's the case, each person has to apply for their own ITIN number, and 50% of the sales price is assigned to each person. Question number 4. What if the foreigner is applying for the ITIN, but the transaction has to close and he has not received it yet? The answer is as follows. The escrow agent has to send in the funds no later than 20 days from the day the transaction closes. If not, there will be late charges. So before that 20th day, the escrow agent will send in the check along with all the documentation. And on the documentation, where there's a form, where there's a box that asks for the seller's ITIN number, it will be marked applied for and sent off. This way, the IRS will know that you are in the process of applying for it. Question number 5. What if the foreigner is applying for the reduced withholding and the transaction has to close and he has not received it yet? Well, if the escrow agent has received a copy of the 8288B form that was used to request the reduced withholding, and if the escrow agent has gotten proof that it was mailed to the IRS, then the escrow agent may agree to withhold the maximum amount of withholding for the sales price until the reduced withholding is issued. You should check with the escrow agent if they are willing to do so, because it's not an automatic thing. As I said in part 1, it's always better that the escrow agent is holding the 10 or 15%, and not send it to the IRS for the IRS to hold it. Because if the IRS holds a 10 or 15%, they may not even qualify you for a reduced withholding. So, question number 6. Can I submit the reduced withholding request if I don't have an ITIN? And the answer is no. The IRS will automatically reject a reduced withholding if there's no ITIN on it. So I recommend that you ask your CPA to file the request for ITIN and the request for reduced withholding at the same time. Question number 7. If the investment is made under a U.S. domestic corporate entity, but the actual officers or members of that corporate entity are foreigners, does a withholding have to be made? The answer is consult with your CPA. It really depends on how this U.S. corporate entity was set up and whether or not they have been filing income tax returns under it. So we would defer to your CPA. Please contact them and get your details to them so that they can give you a determination. Question number 8. What if the buyer refuses to sign the declaration that says that he will occupy the property as his principal residence 50% of the use time? The answer is, if the buyer refuses to sign the declaration, then the withholding has to be done. And it will be done at the higher 15% rate. Question number 9. What does occupy the property as a principal residence 50% of the use time mean? The answer is as follows. In the first 2 years after the purchase, this individual buyer, mind you, it has to be an individual buyer, not a corporate buyer. If this individual buyer or a member of his family will use the property as his residence for at least 50% of the number of days that the property is in use, then it will qualify. This means, let's say that this buyer is going to use this property 200 days. And out of the 200 days, 100 of it, he's actually going to be living on the property as his principal residence. Then yes, it would qualify. Question number 10. What if I am selling the property at a loss? Or what if I am selling under a short sale and I'm getting no money at the end? The first part to this answer is as follows. It doesn't matter. The withholding still applies. I would suggest that the request for the reduced withholding be sent out as soon as possible. And then part 2 would be in a short sale. And remember, a short sale is when the seller's loan has too much on it and the sale price does not cover this loan. So the seller ends up giving all of his net proceeds to this payoff lender. That's a short sale. So in a short sale, the amount of withholding has to be taken into account in the amount of proceeds that this payoff lender will get. This lender is going to want to see a copy of the closing statement, and he may not approve the whole short sale if he sees that there's a withholding that has to be given to the IRS. This lender may require that this seller bring in this withholding and deposit it into escrow. Question number 11. What if the seller is a foreigner in the U.S. on a work visa and has an ITIN? Do you have to withhold? There's 2 parts to this answer. First of all, a work visa does not mean that he is a non-resident alien. He may very well be a legal resident alien. Now, the seller has to be able to sign the FIRPTA affidavit under penalty of perjury, which, if you remember, perjury means willfully making a false statement. So he has to sign the affidavit under penalty of perjury that he is not a non-resident alien, meaning that he is either a U.S. citizen or he is a legal U.S. resident. And part 2 says that if he signs this form, the escrow agent is going to have to consider that he is not a foreigner. However, if the escrow agent has actual knowledge that this person is actually a foreigner, then whatever form that the seller signed is not going to be valid, and that withholding is going to apply. Question number 12. What if the foreign seller is selling the property and he's carrying back a loan for the buyer? This is when the buyer maybe doesn't have enough money or can't get a loan for himself, and so the seller is willing to lend the buyer the money. You still have to do this withholding, even if the seller is not getting any money back because the buyer is going to be paying him back in installment sales in the future. The seller will still have to withhold, and he's going to have to bring in this money for this withholding before the close of escrow. Question number 13. What if the foreign seller is doing a 1031 exchange and all of his money will be used for his new exchange purchase? As long as the proceeds are used for the exchange purchase, no withholding is going to be required. But if there's anything left over and it's not used for this purchase, then the withholding will have to take place on the amount that was left over. Question number 14. What if the seller signed the FIRPTA affidavit saying that he is not a foreigner, but the buyer still wants the escrow agent to withhold? This is a little tricky. Remember that the buyer is considered by the IRS as the withholding agent, and he has to take all responsibilities for the withholding. So if the buyer says, I don't care, I want you to withhold, the escrow agent has to withhold if the buyer demands it. But if the seller has a problem with this and does not want the withhold, this is when the seller may need to get an attorney, one who is understanding of the FIRPTA issues and the IRS Code Section 1445 to represent him and negotiate with the buyer. And finally, my last question, I have an ITIN. Does it expire? And the answer is yes, it actually does, especially if it has not been used. So the time limit at this time is about 3 years, but it does change. So I would ask the seller with an ITIN to please have the CPA check with the IRS if the ITIN that he has expired or not. Thank you for watching. Today's t-shirt is my little trip down the Amazon t-shirt. As I mentioned in my FIRPTA Part 1 presentation, one of the best vacations that I had taken was one that we went to Peru. We visited the Machu Picchu, we did the Nazca lines, and we also traveled and stayed at a rainforest refuge on the Amazon River, Refugio Amazonas. And I have to commemorate that wonderful trip with this fun t-shirt. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the comment section or the community section. Or you can email me at hi@juliana2.tv. Thank you, and I shall see you the next time around.